Here we go. We're going to do notes. I've got 3 little subtopics. I've got it all on a slide deck that I'll give you. And then we have 4 different coding activities we're going to do after the notes. I thought it'd just be worth talking about some of the common errors that I've seen over the years with array lists. So here we go. Array lists are awesome. How about that? And here are some errors you should try to avoid. One is confusing arrays with array lists. Remember, with arrays, you can't resize an array, but you can, add and change the size, add things to and remove things from an array list. With array lists, you use get and set instead of square brackets. And then with array lists, we use dot size to find out how big it is, instead of dot length with no parentheses afterwards. So dot size is a method that returns a value, and then dot length is just a property of an array. It's not a method. That's why it doesn't have parentheses after it. I think I have 6 points. The second point, array lists only hold object data, not primitive data. So that's like frogs or students or books or strings. If you need to make an array list with primitive data, you use the capital letter version of the primitive data class. Those are called wrapper classes. So it's like capital I integer or capital D double. Next, you have to say what type of object you'll be storing in an array list when you create it. So you notice I'm showing you right here in the middle of the screen, array list string, you put it between the greater than, less than symbols. On both sides of the equal sign, you need, it may seem repetitive, but that's the way it works. And then don't forget the empty parentheses at the end. That tells Java that you're calling the constructor. And then there's no arguments, so you're just calling the constructor and it creates a new array list. 5, if you're going to be removing things from an array list, be sure, while traversing it, be sure to start at the end and work backwards. Otherwise, you may miss some of the elements you're trying to remove. So this is an example, just like we printed that one backwards in the warm-up. I was just doing that to, give you practice on going backwards. But this is, finding everything in an array that is the actual word temp, and it deletes it, and I think, yeah, this is the last one. Oh, no, we have 7. So here's something. It's a unspoken rule that if you break, it'll just crash. So don't change the size of an array list if you're using an enhanced for loop. So let's say you were doing an enhanced for loop and you're going through an array list, looking at everything, and then you're like, oh, I want to add a new member, a new element to the end. If you do that, you'll get this error. It'll crash. It'll say concurrent modification exception error. So if you ever get that error, maybe you'll remember I told you at some point, don't change, don't add or remove things from an array list if you're going through it with an enhanced for loop. Enhanced for loops are great for getting information out, printing, adding up things, but don't be changing it in a loop that is part of an enhanced for loop. The 7th and last thing to remember is if you want to change elements in an array list, in general, it's best to use a regular for loop and then use the get and the set methods. So this code right here just looks crazy, I know. But it's if you wanted to change all the elements in an array to be uppercase, like store them uppercase in the array, you literally would have to do this. So words.set, that's telling Java, we're going to change what's in this thing. Whatever's at index I want to replace it with what we got from index I, but the uppercase version of it. So this would replace every element in an array with its uppercase version. An array list. And we do this with the get and set commands and a regular for loop. Not you can't do this with a enhanced for loop. And then this is not an error, but this was up on the, I watched almost all the AP Classroom videos that are up there for Unit 7 yesterday. And this graphic caught my eye. I thought it'd just be great for you to see. These are ways that you can traverse an array list. So, with a for loop, you can say, hey, if I start with I equals 0 and keep going as long as I is less than array.size and, up by 1. Or you could start at 0 and then you could say less than or equal to array.size minus 1. That works also. And then if you're trying to go down from the end of an array list to the beginning, here's two ways you could do the for loop. Start at the last item, that's ArrayList.size minus 1. And then you may have seen this both ways. For the Boolean condition in the for loop, you can say I greater than or equal to 0. Or like I did in the warm-up, if you saw me, I just said I greater than -1 because it's just simpler than typing greater than or equal to. I mean, it's not a big deal. Either one works fine. Any questions? Okay, so that's just part 1 for today. Part 2, here's something. I think we've done this before, but I didn't want to bother to go dig it up. But this is covered officially here in this unit. It's something called a linear search. And a linear search is when you're looking for something in an array or an array list, either one, and you start either at the front or the back, and you go through the whole thing looking for it. Linear means in a line. So it's a linear search if you start somewhere like the very beginning or the very end, and you go through all the elements looking for whatever you're looking for. And so usually you use a for loop. And in Java, it's traditional in a search. If you were writing a method that was going to do a linear search of an array or an array list, you usually would return the index of the element if you found it, and then you'd return -1 if you didn't find it. That's a standard Java convention. So we have one of our activities today is a linear search. I think I'm showing you one right here. Yeah. Oh, good. I forget. Did I? No. Here we go. So here's a method. It says public static int find it. And so it's going to return an integer. See, this int means it's going to return an integer. It's called find it. It receives as a parameter an array list of capital I integers called nums. And it's also receiving a value. That's the one we're going to search for. So here's a for loop. It starts at the beginning. It goes all the way to the end, up by 1 each time. And it says, hey, if the current item is equal to the value we're looking for, then return the current index. Otherwise, return -1. So this is just classic textbook linear search. So you've done this sort of thing. I'm naming it officially. It's a linear search. And a linear search is very easy to code, as you can see. Its drawback is if you have a very large data set, it can be time consuming, right? Because you're starting at one end and you're going to go through the whole thing. We're going to learn about another type of search called a binary search, but that requires that the list be sorted before you can do it. And a binary search is much, much faster, but it requires that the data be sorted. This linear search, the data does not have to be sorted. And for our purposes in this class, a linear search would always be fine, but let's say you were Twitter or Facebook or something that just had billions of entries in some database. You wouldn't want to start at the beginning and go through all of them checking to look for something. You'd want to have a quicker way to search for things. And there's lots of quicker ways. Any questions about the linear search? Hopefully you can see, even if it may have seemed like, oh no, he's giving us so much today. I'm not really giving you that much. We're just going to be practice. Alonzo, great question. The question was, why are we returning -1? That's just Java standard code and kind of programming in a lot of languages. If something is not found, then they'll tend to return a -1. You might have remembered we had an index of method for strings. And if you did an index of and you were looking for a little string inside of another string, you get -1 if it's not found. So that's just the standard in this programming language. That means we didn't find it. So it'll either, this code showing on the screen will either return where the item was, which element it was, or it says -1 if it wasn't found. Yeah, that's just the way they designed it. Okay, so then the last thing that I'm showing you today is I wanted you to just get an experience of having an array list in a custom class. And I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about, and then you'll get to practice it today. When you use an array list in a custom class, you declare it up top. You do like half of it up top, and you do the other half in the constructor. So I'll show you what I mean. Here's I made a pretend class called comments list, and look up top here. It says private array list string comments. So that's, remember, in a class you put your variables up top and you make them private. That woman on the AP Classroom calls these private variables up top, she calls them data members. I call them variables or attributes of the class, but we can, work together calling them either one. And then here's the constructor, public comments list. When you call the constructor, notice this is like the second half of a normal array list declaration. So normally, like if you're just making an array list in a bunch of code, you wouldn't have the word private. You would just say array list string comments equals new array list string, right? That would all just be one line. But when when an array list is one of the private variables in a class, you have to do the left hand of the equals of the statement, the left side of the statement up top, without a new, and then in the constructor, you finish creating it. That way, this top one, kind of lays the groundwork, lets the class know what's going on. And then when you actually instantiate, when you create the object, that's when the array list actually gets created. So we put the first part up top with the private word, and then in the constructor, you have to finish it. So you have the variable name equals new array list, whatever type it is. In this case, it was an array list of strings. There's nothing like, actually coding this yourself, and that's what we're going to do today. So any questions? Okay. I think that was it. Yeah. So today's work, all due by midnight. And I say, don't worry, most of these are very quick, are these 5 things. And I'm getting good at my 36 math. 5 times 36 is 180. I look forward to grading 180 of your little assignments today. I guess I got to post them before you can start doing